The class of 2020 will be announced very soon for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Here's where we stand now with just over 30% of the ballots known here, according to BaseballHallOfFameTracker.com. Derek Jeter, we all know he's a shoo-in. Larry Walker, Curt Schilling, Barry Bonds trending above the 75% needed for election. Roger Clemens just below that 75%. And of course, you have here the rest of this list here. Billy Wagner at 32%, Jeff Kent, Andrew Jones, Sammy Sosa, Andy Pettitte, and Bobby Abreu. And remember, 75% needed for election. So let's discuss a few of the interesting cases. I want to start with Scott Rowland. Scott Rowland, third year on the ballot, listed on just over 17% of the ballots that were cast a year ago. What about him? Hall of Famer or just shy, Bill?
Look, I think he was one of the game's very good players. And if he would have played more yearly, you know, like 155 games a year instead of being injured as much as he was, because he was. And I'm not taking anything away from him as far as a talented player, but when you think about the Hall of Fame, part of that is also staying out there on the field over and over and over again. Yeah. But I tell you what, this guy is a third baseman. He was one of the modeled guys that you looked at when he did his pregame stuff, because he took every ground ball like it was important there. That means something to me. But I just think his injury time and his time that he was not playing the game is certainly going to hurt him as far as the Hall is concerned.
Only 3 seasons with 155 games or more for Scott Rowland. Where do you fall, Dan?
I'm a big Hall guy, but I agree with Billy on this one. I think durability is really, really important. You have to show up and you've got to play every day. You know, Robert, I hate these discussions in this sense that, you know, because he's such a great player and he was a great teammate and he played the game the right way all the time. But I do believe the lack of game played leaves him just short of being able to do that.
Yeah. Omar Vizquel, 11 seasons in Cleveland, third year on the ballot as well, listed on just under 43% of the ballots cast a year ago. Dan, a supreme defender, a magician with the glove. Where do you stand on Omar Vizquel?
Well, again, I had the pleasure of watching Omar play all those years in Cleveland, part of John and I acquiring him. And so I probably have a soft spot in this, but watching him play defense every day on a club that offensively was a joke. He was the glue. You know, every single day he made our pitching staff better. He made routine plays, he made difficult plays, he made high-pressure plays, and he played every day. So when I look at Louis Aparicio, I look at Ozzie Smith, you know, they were kind of light offensively for me, too. He falls right into that category. His defense was so great for such a long period of time, and he wasn't an out offensively. For me, he's a Hall of Famer.
You know, he was pushing 3,000 hits towards the end. Whether that's a compiler or not, something needs to be said for that. You know, the one thing when Dan talked about it was the better defensive shortstop that the game had for a long period of time. And I'll say this, from watching him from the dugout, if you're on the opposing side, the thing that he did probably as well as any infielder that I've ever seen was his hand placement got far out in front of his body, better than most. And there were times, multiple times, a ground ball was hit and it would take that little last tricky hop and he would subtly go like this and catch it and throw. And you might be sitting on the bench on the offensive side, say to a fellow infielder, well, that ball might have bit me. And it didn't bite him. So does that put him in the top 1%, which is the Hall? And in my opinion, I would probably say no, but I don't think there's any doubt when you watch this guy day in and day out, field of baseball.
His glove-to-hand transfer, Billy, was
pretty good.
Just incredible.
It was pretty good.
You mentioned Louis Aparicio. Omar trying to join Louis Aparicio as the only Venezuelan-born Hall of Famers. One more name before we get out of here. Curt Schilling. Start with you, Bill.
Tell you what, when you faced him, there was something different about him. And I'm soon going to get into the point where I can't judge anybody on the eyeball test anymore because I didn't stand up there against them. But Curt Schilling, when he was out there on the bump, and he was right, he could throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball in the outside corner, hits the Nats rear end. Then he could throw the split, he could throw the slider. And you see what his numbers were in the postseason. I mean, flat out ridiculous. So when you look at Curt Schilling and his ability on the mound, did he put himself in the 1% of pitchers that you had to face? And I might have to say, yes, he did.
Tremendous postseason resume, Dan.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer for me. Again, I'm a big Hall guy, but when you dominate at the largest stage that this industry has a chance to offer you, and you're that good, you know, and he was also great during the regular season. You know, he's a Hall of Famer, and he took the ball when he was 100% healthy and when he was 50% healthy.
Yeah.
And he competed really, really well. And when he was right, he was absolutely dominant.
Well, wall-to-wall coverage right here on the network. Next Tuesday, our coverage begins in earnest, 3 o'clock Eastern, as a new class will be welcomed into Cooperstown.